looks like we've reached critical mass for this breakout session of our UAE virtual trade mission. For those that are joining us new, welcome. This is the third session that we've done today. We're very grateful to Danny Seabright with the U.S. UAE Business Council, David Greenhall, as well as a couple others from the team that have been with us throughout the day. It has been busy. We've had great discussions up to this point, first on energy, then on life sciences and healthcare. And we're excited to jump in and talk more about aerospace and defense. I'm sure Danny will dive into the numbers a little bit, but the UAE is a significant security partner of the United States. They're a strategic partner. There's a very, very strong relationships between U.S. companies and the UAE when it comes to aerospace and defense. And given how important that industry is here in Utah, there is immense opportunity for Utah companies to participate in that strategic partnership and in that relationship. So we're going to dive into that here in a minute. Before jumping into the details, just a recap for anybody who wasn't able to join the general session that we did yesterday. Danny and his team gave us a phenomenal overview of the UAE economy, the business climate there, the nature of the U.S.-UAE relationship when it comes to trade and investment, and why that's so significant, as well as key verticals and industries that we want our companies to be aware of as they look for opportunities to grow and expand in the UAE. More generally, why are we doing this virtual trade mission? For one, we were supposed to be there last week with 50 to 60 companies. Like everything this spring, COVID derailed those plans. But we want to make sure that we're continuing to do everything we can to help Utah companies identify new sources of revenue and new partnerships. Utah has done an incredible job at flattening the curve of COVID-19 that then positions us to bounce back economically very strong. There are other parts of the world where that has not been the case. Other companies from other places have had to pull back more than what Utah companies have had to do. And so we want to be very aggressive at helping companies capture new market share to grow and expand in new markets. So expect to hear more from us about other virtual trade missions. Courtney Ray, who you all know and been communicating with, runs all of World Trade Center Utah's international programming. She's working with our partners in Canada, in Israel, in Australia, in New Zealand, to put more of these sessions together. And so keep your eyes out, and please reach out and let us know if there are markets that are particularly important for you, and especially for the aerospace and defense industry here in Utah. Please let us know. We will go to work on lining up webinars with key partners in those markets. So without further ado, we're very grateful to have Danny and David helping to inform us about the aerospace and defense industry in the UAE. I strongly encourage everybody to think through the questions, comments that you may have after we get to the presentation. We'll make sure at the end we have plenty of time for Q&A. I know many of you have sent Courtney some questions, and so Courtney will read off a few of those questions, but we've been intentional with making this a Zoom meeting and not just a webinar, because we want you to be able to turn your mics on to jump in and ask questions and to share a little bit about the good work that you're doing. The one ask that we would have is if you jump in, please introduce yourself and your company, and then just take a minute to explain what your company is doing. That will help Danny and David calibrate their response to you. And at the end, we'll be sure to share a little bit more information on ways that World Trade Center Utah can plug in and help you take action from what we're going to be covering today. So Danny, with that introduction and overview, I'll go ahead and kick it over to you. I look forward to your comments, and we'll go from there.
Thanks very much, Miles. Thanks, Courtney and the whole team. We really appreciate this opportunity to partner with all of you on this important mission. We're disappointed that we're not with you in the UAE right now, but we know we're going to get to travel. The worst of COVID-19 is behind us. The Business Council was created about 13 or 14 years ago as an opportunity to help get out more accurate information about the trade and investment relationship between the United States and the UAE. We've been working very hard over the last 14 years to be a platform for reliable information. The defense sector, aerospace sector, space vertical, if you will, are three areas or three overlapping areas that are, I would say, after oil and gas, have been the bread and butter of the U.S. UAE business relationship. Not to mention, as Miles intimated, the very, very close security cooperation relationship that we have between our two countries. I'm going to let David give a brief overview of the relationship in defense, aerospace, and space. David, you have 6 or 7 pages here. I expect you to cut that down significantly as you work through, so that we have some time for Q&A. Do the slides. I think a lot of the picture paints 1,000 words, and we can shorten this a little bit and give an overview. And I'll punctuate. Given my 30 years of experience in this vertical in particular, I had 10 years at DIA and 10 years at DoD, almost exclusively with a focus on the Middle East and the Gulf region. I'll punctuate a couple points along the way that I think are really important to underscore in what David says. So David, please, go ahead.
Kicking off with the defense relationship, so the UAE spends tens of billions of dollars every year on defense, and this is going to continue. There's an enduring threat from Iran, and this threat is manifested in new ways. So you've seen that in terms of the attacks on commercial tankers. You've seen that in terms of the attack on Saudi Arabia's oil infrastructure. There's new types of threats. And at the same time, the UAE has been more assertive in its regional policy, again, leading to greater defense procurement. The UAE has a strong preference to buy American. That's because American equipment is superior. It's interoperable, and is part of a larger defense and security relationship that has seen the UAE participate in 6 coalition actions with the United States. That includes thousands of US troops being stationed in the UAE, joint exercises and training, and deep military intelligence cooperation. So there's a preference to buy American, and key defense companies such as Lockheed, Raytheon, Boeing are present in big numbers. We will turn to other suppliers such as Russia and China if they can't get what they need, but again, the preference is American. The UAE is seeking to build up its local defense industry. You've seen that in terms of the creation of EDGE. This was something that was mentioned on yesterday's call, which is a consolidation of 25 different UAE defense companies. It now employs about 12,000 people and has approximately $5 billion in revenue. This is the new thing in the UAE defense sector. Defense sales are subject to offsets requirements, much to the chagrin of US industry. The idea is that the UAE translates its defense procurement into local investment, into work packages for UAE suppliers or manufacturers, or the distribution of knowledge, technology, and capabilities to local partners. Another key thing to keep in mind in the defense space is restrictions on sales of US technology, and also the US desire to keep Israel's qualitative military edge, QME. And you've seen both of these play out in terms of armed drones. You've seen that in terms of the F-35 program. And related to this is an increased congressional scrutiny over the last few years of arms sales to the UAE as a result of the war in Yemen. This has softened a little bit lately because the UAE has withdrawn from its operations for the most part in that country, but it's still an issue for defense sales. In terms of the key players, there's the Ministry of Defense, which is taking an increasingly prominent role over the years. There's the UAE Armed Forces, GHQ, the Army, the Air Force, the Navy, the Presidential Guard, with the Air Force and the Presidential Guard really getting much attention from UAE leadership. There's the Tawazun Economic Council, which I mentioned being overseeing the UAE's offsets program. There's local defense companies such as EDGE, but also others such as IGG. And then there's the major American primes such as Lockheed, Raytheon Technologies, and Boeing. So that's defense in a nutshell. On the commercial aviation side, the UAE has long been a global aviation hub. Dubai International Airport is the busiest airport for international travelers, 86 million per year, and is looking to expand to 120 million. Abu Dhabi International Airport handles about 21 million a year, and it's building a new terminal that will have another 45 million. On top of that, the UAE is constructing this new airport, Al Maktoum International Airport, at the site of Expo 2020 Dubai, that is eventually, and plans have been delayed, but will eventually accommodate 160 million passengers. It's supposed to be one of the largest, if not the largest in the world. These airports are serviced by leading global airlines. You probably heard of Emirates, 159 destinations, Etihad, 84 destinations, and then smaller carriers such as Air Arabia and Fly Dubai, which mostly serve regional routes. And these airlines have made significant purchases of aircraft. So Emirates has a fleet of 270 aircraft, Etihad 108, and a lot of these have been Boeing aircraft. So Emirates, for instance, is the world's largest operator of Boeing 777s. Fly Dubai flies an all Boeing fleet of planes. And it's not just Boeing who benefits, but all the companies that feed into this equipment. So whether it be GE engines, Collins Aerospace, avionics, or other things further down the supply chain. The Boeing MAX crisis dealt a big blow to the UAE's aviation industry. This was particularly true for Fly Dubai. So for instance, 20% of their flights got canceled. And the COVID-19 pandemic has obviously lent an even more severe blow to the industry. The UAE has indefinitely suspended all normal inbound and or announced that it would indefinitely suspend all normal inbound and outbound passenger flights. It's talking about when it's going to resume operations now, and it has some tentative dates. It is operating some cargo flights and repatriating citizens to and from the country, but operations are a shell of what they used to be. That said, the commercial aviation sector is a strategic industry for the UAE. It underpins what the UAE plans to do in terms of being a regional hub for business, tourism, transshipment, and everything else. So the UAE government is backing this sector, and it will continue to be an important part of the story looking forward. So in terms of key players, I mentioned Emirates, Etihad, Air Arabia, and Fly Dubai as the major local carriers. Airports such as Dubai Airports, Abu Dhabi Airports, aircraft manufacturers, Boeing and Airbus, the usual ones, and some local manufacturers. In terms of space, the UAE has grand ambitions. For a couple decades now, UAE companies have contracted to launch satellites into space through companies such as Yahsat and Thuraya. And over the years, it sought to develop its local capabilities to build these satellites. And the UAE was very proud in 2018 to have its first 100% Emirati-built satellite, KhalifaSat, be launched into space. But it's not just satellites. They're also, as you see on the screen right now, the UAE recently sent a cosmonaut, Haza Al Mansouri, to the International Space Station, and he was the first Emirati and the first Arab astronaut to go to space.
David, let me interrupt. There was a Saudi prince who was an astronaut in the 90s that went up on the U.S. shuttle, so he's not the first Arab, but it's been the first Arab in maybe 20 years, so very important.
There you go. I rely on Danny for a historical context.
For anything older than 10 years,
there you go. So it's not just,
go ahead.
So the UAE is also intent to explore and eventually settle Mars. So right now, there is a UAE probe called the HOPE probe that's in Japan waiting to launch to Mars. When it arrives 9 months later, it's going to explore the Martian atmosphere. And again, this has been built by Emirati engineers, I should note, in partnership with a lot of leading US universities, funded by the space agency, and again, ready to launch if a situation allows in the next month. So in order to support all these activities, the UAE has created an institutional framework. This involves creating a UAE space agency in 2014 to regulate the sector, develop human capital, and support national space projects like the ones that I mentioned. It created the Mohammed bin Rashid Space Center to locally develop satellites. And it developed just last year a National Space Strategy 2030 that is supposed to provide an overarching guidance for this program. And when doing so, the UAE has looked internationally for partnerships. So for instance, in 2018, NASA and the UAE Space Agency signed a major agreement for cooperation in research, exchange of knowledge, and so on and so forth. So again, the key players in this sector: the UAE Space Agency, the Mohammed bin Rashid Space Center, Yahsat, Thuraya, which have recently merged to become one under the Mubadala umbrella. Those are the key actors in this sector. So how do you get engaged? There are certain key times for engagement in the aerospace and defense sector. The UAE has two major exhibitions. One is IDEX, which takes place in Abu Dhabi every 2 years, and it's next going to happen in February 2021. And this is the International Defense Exhibition, so this is defense focused. There's also the Dubai Air Show, also takes place every 2 years, and this is more aerospace focused, and this is where the big announcements of UAE acquisition of aircraft take place. It's next supposed to take place in November 2021. There's also other conferences such as the Global Aerospace Conference and others, not just in the UAE, but also in the USA. So the Emiratis will send large delegations to participate in shows such as AUSA or SAT Show here in Washington, DC. So it's important to note that in the defense sector, persistence is key, as defense sales can take years to materialize. Relationships are also key, and identifying the right local partner is crucial. You need someone to advocate on your behalf and also gain information, if you will, from inside the tent. I'll stop there and turn it over to questions.
Let me just make a couple points if I could. First of all, thank you, David. I will say that if David sounds authoritative in what he says, it's because he spent 5 years living and working in Abu Dhabi and has a good background here in his own right. So very, very important asset that we have on the Business Council team. As I said at the beginning, the defense sector is one of the most critical verticals and sectors of business and defense cooperation between our two countries. David alluded to some of the policy constraints vis-a-vis our policy with Israel, but a lot of that has changed and evolved very, very quickly over the last few years, and a lot of the previous barriers are being broken down quickly, largely because the UAE and Israel are on the road to becoming fast friendly allies, and hopefully we'll have official relations soon. There will be an Israel pavilion at Expo 2020. There's a Jewish temple being built in in Abu Dhabi, and there are a few other things underway between Israel in sort of some soft areas between Israel and the UAE, which are going to grab a lot of headlines over the next couple of years. So that translates and moves into the defense relationship and allows the U.S. To sell things to the UAE that previously they might have had to wait upwards of 10 years, cutting edge technology that usually, and this is a job I had in the Pentagon, that we would, if we were selling something very advanced to Israel, we usually had a rule that we'd have to wait 10 years before we'd sell it to an Arab country. So that is breaking down quickly, and it's a fast mover here. China is starting to eat our lunch in some of these areas, and that's a really important aspect of this that you all need to consider. And the reason they are is because of price, and because on some of the most critical technologies, what I like to call the crown jewels, we still are holding out and not selling them to some of our Arab partners. And the UAE has sort of taken a decision over the last 3 or 4 years that if they can't get it from us, and they need it for their legitimate self-defense, and they're going to go to whomever they can get it from, even if it's not as good as what they might get from the U.S. This has created a little bit of a worry in the relationship between the U.S. and the UAE, and American defense and security officials have been watching this and working on it closely for the last few years. And Miles, I know you've been involved in this from the White House standpoint in your previous job. So with that, why don't I stop there and open it up, back to Courtney and to Miles for Q and to moderate. Really important that we understand a little bit about each of your firms and what vertical or sector you're really in when you ask. Thank you.
Miles?
That's great. Thank you, Danny and David. And Courtney, over to you to ask some questions and moderate the discussion.
Okay. So just some of the questions that have come in. So the Middle East is a critical market for U.S. defense products. What capabilities are a priority for the UAE, and what opportunities are available for Utah companies to demonstrate their products?
Well, the first one I can answer. The second one I don't know, because I don't know what Utah companies in particular are offering. But broadly, anything the hot technology, as David alluded to in his remarks right now, is anything to do with counter UAV, counter drone technology. I don't know if any of you have seen this movie, the White House Down series of movies. The most recent one, a swarm of UAVs attacked the president when he's out on a fishing boat in the middle of the river. This is a capability that the Iranians have developed with the help from the Chinese and others, that we don't have a defense against, even our own for our own people, our own services, our own service members. And the Emiratis are to try to gain more capability in how they counter Iranian UAV and Iranian drone technology, as witness what happened this past summer with the attacks on Saudi Arabia, the attacks on UAE ships in the Gulf. This is the most high-profile area. Then you step down one level from that, and it's any and all technologies that help the Emiratis project power, deal with standoff capabilities, standoff weapon capabilities, standoff defense capability, any of those sorts of things. And then finally, anything that helps them become more network centric. All the things that link the shooter, the sensor together to create what America has been doing for over a decade now, creating the system of systems. And that's what the Emiratis are also focused on a bit in what they're doing. They've come back from the war in Yemen with a lot of lessons learned on combat operations on the ground and in the air. Dealing with rebel forces, dealing with forces on the ground that don't need to something very that sophisticated to cause a lot of damage. And so they are right now, and have been the last 6-9 months, in the process of doing their lessons learned from the conflict in Yemen. And that's also going to have an impact on some of their procurement activities going forward in the next number of months and years. So I'll stop there.
Great. Thank you.
About Utah companies' capability, I mean, maybe some of the companies on the line could give us a little sense of what sorts of capabilities you're offering, and I could tell you if I think the Emiratis are interested or not.
Sure. Does anyone want to chime in and talk about some of their capabilities you think might be of interest? Don't be shy.
Hi, this is Keith Edwards. I represent a company called Keomac. We've got most of our manufacturing for the company out in Layton, Utah. Can you hear me okay?
Absolutely.
Excellent. Okay, so we're an aerospace and defense technology company founded in 2003. The company is really spread across the United States. We're integrated closely with the U.S. Air Force, but also now more the U.S. Navy, Army, and even certain elements within the Army, to include some of the special operations organizations that are out there. We are, again, primarily aerospace and defense related, but we also do commercial work. Examples of some of our products would be the A-10 tank buster aircraft. There's very few parts on that aircraft that we currently don't somehow touch, engineer, provide data packages for, or even full up parts, assemblies, or even for that aircraft.
The Emiratis do not have A-10.
I understand. No, I understand.
So
and really that's just
okay.
That's more of a general point to take where I want to go, which is F-16s. I don't know if they have F-16 in their inventories or not, but I do know they use H-60 helicopters. We manufacture gunner crew chief seats for the U.S. Navy that operates the MH-60 era Seahawk aircraft. So we do things like mission planning systems, digital data devices that are encrypted for all types of fixed wing and rotary wing platforms, that sort of work. So my boss would probably describe us as a company that tackles complex problems that require engineering, management, facilities to do it, equipment, and manufacturing capability, all of which we have in a good number of. We're also doing some COVID work. We're actually have invested in some 3D printing machines. We're going to be helping the state of Utah out with COVID test swabs, and then also some of the PPE that's in short supply for the state of Utah. So great company, about 310 people at this point and growing, amazing capabilities. I'm just happy to be affiliated with them and really interested in the UAE market for defense and security products that we work with.
So the Emiratis fly the most sophisticated F-16 ever made. It's called the Block 60. It's actually more sophisticated than the one in our inventory. We created it especially for them about 20 some years ago. I was at the Pentagon then when we did that. And they also fly the Black Hawk and a number of armed Black Hawk variants. So as you know, Sikorsky is now part of Lockheed Martin. Lockheed Martin is their top, of all the U.S. defense companies, I'd say Lockheed Martin and Raytheon are their two top partners. And I know you're probably a sub to Lockheed in the work that you do if you're on the F-16 and you're on the Seahawk. So I would say starting with understanding what your capability, whatever it is that you have on those two platforms is might already be in the UAE. Starting with Lockheed Martin to understand that and understand if it's not, if it's something that that Lockheed might think that the Emiratis might be interested in. As I've said on a number of these calls, understanding the marketplace of the American companies that are already there and working and successful in your verticals is one challenges, or not challenge is the wrong word, tasks that you need to undertake to the best what the UAE might be interested in and what you have to offer and sell.
Okay, understand. Thank you. So I guess as a follow-on, we probably wouldn't want to spend too much time or energy trying to find a local partner like an IGG or somebody like that. Would it be maybe a better path to go through a prime like Sikorsky?
It depends. It really depends, and it could be a plug and play for a couple different things. You might. I mean, IGG is the partner to General Atomics on the Predator. So while you might want to partner with Lockheed Martin for something on the F-16, you might want to work with IGG, the local partner for something to do with drones and the Predator. It just depends. I'm suggesting that starting with the American companies which you already have a relationship with and understanding what they're doing in the UAE and if they're already using your product in the UAE is a great first step in due diligence for understanding where there might be opportunity for you going forward in the marketplace. That's all I'm trying to say.
Understand. Thank you very much, Dan.
You're welcome.
Does anyone else want to mention some of their products to Danny?
Sure, I'll take a chance if I can.
Hi, David. Go ahead.
I just so that you know, the reason I've been on so many of these calls, I'm an active member of the U.S. Department of Commerce District Export Council for Utah. And so I help represent a lot of Utah companies in their global enterprise. We just participated with one of my clients, Atex Defense Systems, and they've developed a nanotech Kevlar layer that they build for personal protection with vests and also in vehicles, and they developed a bulletproof glass. We had a very good show in Bangkok back in November with the Asia Defense and Security Show. We actually had quite a few Middle Eastern companies come and approach us there. And just maybe we'll refer back to you more on the best way to work with some of those local agents, because we make the technology here, but many times it is customized in the local country. What we had a lot of interest in the Middle East was actually taking existing vehicles, adding our carbon Kevlar infused technology into the door panels, the roof, the floor, to have an armored vehicle.
Understand. Those are all capabilities that the UAE looks for on the international market. I would say that in addition to purchasing capabilities like that, are increasingly interested in manufacturing themselves in the UAE in partnership with foreign partners or like somebody else, bringing that technology to the UAE and manufacturing it there, retrofitting the vehicles, whatever it might be. That's something that IGG, which David mentioned earlier, is also a key partner in doing, as are some other Emirati firms that we could put you in touch with. But there is great interest in that area, in those areas, for sure.
Well, thank you. And this is a very proprietary Utah technology with this graphite nanofiber. So thank you.
And the trade shows that David mentioned, IDEX in particular, is probably quickly becoming. It's certainly more important and bigger than Bangkok. It's as important as any of the shows in Europe these days, as a place to see and be seen, even if you're not exhibiting, just to come and participate and walk the halls and have meetings and get to know some of the players. It's an incredibly important the defense show, the Abu Dhabi Defense Show is very, very important.
Is there anyone else who would like to talk about some of their products?
I'd like to jump in here. My name is John Reese. I work with Laco Technologies here in Salt Lake, and I'm kind of excited about this opportunity because I used to live in Dubai and kind of know how things work a little bit. But what we do is we actually build and manufacture thermal TVAC vacuum systems, detection systems for the aerospace satellite industry. Just being one of the industries, we're in industry, we're in the food industry, we're military, but specifically for aerospace, we build thermal vacuum systems to test their products during the manufacturing process of, for example, the big thing right now is the small sat, the satellite shows, or the satellites. One of our biggest customers, SpaceX, for example. So we build those thermal vac systems for these companies to test leaks and vacuum and altitude testing on their satellite products. And also with the U.S. military or defense system with the UAE, can be anything that's launched in the air. We can test and make sure those components are leak tested, vacuum tested, and so forth.
So I suppose I have a similar answer to the first person that spoke. The primes, the U.S. primes, like SpaceX, that you're already working with, are key partners to the UAE. SpaceX has been someone the UAE has worked with for a while now. And I would start with those primes that you're working with on the U.S. side and ask them, inquire from them, what products they have on which you're on or deployed or utilized that they might be selling to the UAE, and understand if you're already there in the market, you don't even know it. That's a first step, and then you would build out from that a better relationship building with some key Emirati partners in your vertical, in your sector.
Well, I know one of the things that we run into is, SpaceX, L3, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, they're all customers of ours, but it's talking to the key person, the right person, and that's where we struggle with. You just can't really pick up the phone and call somebody in the UAE and talk to the right person. I know in doing a lot of international business before, I have personally worked with a lot with the U.S. consulates in those different countries.
Right.
thing that you suggest as well, or because if I call SpaceX right now, they don't know who I can talk to, on different projects in the UAE.
Right. The U.S. consulate the U.S. mission in Abu Dhabi, actually, the commercial office, can be helpful. But this is an area where we and World Trade Center Utah should be able to help you. I mean, we know the key people working on what's call the president of if you give me 2 sentences on what it is your product, what product Lockheed is selling that your application is on, I can call Bob Harwood and say he's the president of Lockheed in the Gulf, and just say, Bob, who in your team in Abu Dhabi is working this application or this program with the Emiratis, and help you make the connection. I mean, that's something we can do given our the fact that all of these companies are our members and we work with all of them at that level. That's just the first step. That's not the only step. But to me, with you guys who are all subs to these major primes, I think it's a really important first step, because it gives you credibility in the market when you go then try to have interactions and engagements with the Emiratis, for you to be able to say, well, I know that we're already on product X and product Y in your military and being used in this way. And the primes are going to be the ones that are, if you don't know already, the most ready, able to give you that answer right off the bat.
Working directly, though, with the UAE government, I know David mentioned that they're talking about maybe doing their own manufacturing of satellites. Obviously, we wouldn't need to talk to the local U.S. companies that are. How would we be able to work directly with them? Would that be also through you as well?
Yeah, you could do that through us. I mean, the way David said it was a little inaccurate. All of these satellites have been produced somewhere else in some other country. Emiratis have certainly been involved. But the satellites were not made in the UAE. Now, the goal and objective in the future is to make satellites in the UAE. But the most recent Mars probe, I think a few components were perhaps put together in the UAE. But these sophisticated communication satellites and even a reconnaissance satellite the Emiratis have been working on are being produced in other countries, which you can imagine very easily the 3 or 4 or 5 top countries that are doing those sorts of things.
Right. So those of us who have, because we're a part of the company we're working with was part of the Mars rover project as well. So when we have that experience, that definitely does help them. Exactly.
And very, very important. Now, putting you in touch with the right people in the UAE space program, again, that would be a good next step. That's for you to take. But I want to caution all of you on the phone. Relationships matter here, and one reason why, again, I've been focused on trying to convince you to talk to your U.S. primes a little bit first. Relationships matter with the Emiratis, and you've got to get on a plane and expend some resource and go out there and people. And you consummate a deal on the first visit. You don't consummate a deal maybe on the third visit. This is a dedicated amount of time and energy and resource getting to know and building the relationships that help you build and grow the business over time. Unless if it's a COVID-19 application that you are the only one in the world that makes it, and you have something so unique that everyone wants it, you're the flavor of the moment, then you might get a deal pretty quickly. But otherwise it just doesn't work that way. So I just want to be cautious about, thinking you're going to get on, going on the trade mission that Utah is organizing is fantastic. It's a great way to go out, build relationships, get to know the lay of the land, understand if there's a there from an interest standpoint in what you're doing. You're going to be required to come back 2 or 3 or 4 times to continue to build those relationships.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I have no problem going back to Dubai. I loved it.
Well, then you know very well what the business environment is like there.
It's all about relationships. That's what it's about.
I hope you can.
And Danny,
validate what I'm saying.
You know, it's absolutely true. And just Danny, just to try to amplify things at that point, because I think it's so important, and to get your advice, given how important relationships are, if you are a company here in Utah, that's maybe a tier 2 company, tier 3 company, you're working with the primes, is it worth the time and energy to invest building the relationship with the Emirati decision makers? Or to your earlier point, is it better to invest that time building the relationship with the local leadership of the prime that you've got the relationship with? Or is it a mix of the two?
It's a mix of the two, and the reason it's a mix of the two is the Emiratis have had a focus for the last 5 to 6 to 7 years on bringing the maintenance, overhaul, and repair, the MRO, of their military equipment in-house. So Lockheed might sell the original F-16 to them with one of your gadgets or widgets or applications on it, but to repair it and overhaul and maintain it, the Emiratis want to do that with their partner companies in the future. So that's where, understanding what's been sold there or what's being sold there by your U.S. prime, and then building a relationship with the Emirati partner that's going to be responsible for maintaining it, overhauling it, repairing it in the future. That's where you then create direct business with the Emiratis.
Right.
And maybe even a manufacturing angle, back to the point about armor and vehicles. If the Emiratis would want to, manufacture that product under license in the UAE, and then work to put it on their vehicles and other countries' vehicles in the region and sell it, manufacturing it under your license in the UAE is also a possibility, if there's a big enough market.
All right, does anyone else want to talk about something that they are manufacturing that they think they'd like to share?
Hi, this is Bruce Huff. Courtney and Miles, thank you very much on behalf of the World Trade Center, and Danny and David, thank you for your participation in this program. Our company has been manufacturing and operating lighter than air aircraft, airships, for about 28 years. They've been commonly used for the outdoor billboard advertising scheme of things, but we've really pivoted this company to not just do that, and I'm going to reserve discussions of commercial use and media for maybe the next session. But in this one, we're currently engaged in a civil contract with the Department of Army to create a hybrid airship system. Because these are piloted and navigable airships, and in the United States, the airship really, their domain is below 3,500 feet over U.S. airspace. And in that situation, we have found them to be very, very effective as what we would call low elevation aerial platforms. This platform being very capable then from a surveillance standpoint for local law enforcement, for government, for FEMA, for border security type activities that we think certainly in the Middle East, and in military applications have mostly used aerostat type devices for this kind of work. The fact that they're navigable has certainly the interest of the Army and others. So I would say that you mentioned something about COVID-19 and is there a direct application today? For example, one of the things that we've tested is the ability to measure literally the fever or temperature of bodies walking out of the U.S. Capitol. You can identify, a lot of those kinds of elements through sensor and data gathering applications. The idea of thermal imaging through cameras and many of the other types of technologies. So the business, basically, if you think about it from the non-commercial, more of the military or government standpoint, is really providing a low elevation aerial platform from which you can deploy. What we're doing right now is testing the deployment of drones, in fact, for the ability to do sensor gathering, data gathering. And as you know, of that ilk of drone that is being used for insurance purposes and for all kinds of uses, they have a very limited battery life, and they have to be line of sight. And being able to deploy from an altitude allows them to have a longer battery life and to actually meet back up with the blimp for battery recharging or replacement. So that's sort of the military government application. And as I say, we're working with the Department of Army right now on some of these things, but clearly it has an application with anyone who has security interests and the ability to do even command and control in an airspace that's below a lot of the more mechanized aircraft.
Thank you for that, Bruce. Is your program in any way connected with Lockheed's?
It's not. Lockheed's is a much larger, their intent was to have heavy payload. And so these are more what you'd consider to be and we're very familiar with their program. And the big interest in light of an aircraft right now are the very, very large ships for heavy payloads.
Right.
And as you know, they've had that built for 10 years and have yet to really have a customer for it. It's I've talked to the Lockheed people.
I'm working with Lockheed. I've been working with Lockheed for 10 years to try to sell that capability to the, and it has interest. I'm not sure, I may be wrong, but I'm not sure there's going to be a lot of interest in your program. I think one of the reasons is in that environment with Iran just across a few kilometers across the waterway, how do you defend those airships from drones and drone attack and things like that? I don't know if that's the reason, but the Emiratis haven't bitten yet.
Yeah, I think the difference and why we think there is a unique space for this is that they're much more nimble. They are, right now people are using aerostats, which are basically tethered blimps. And one of the problems is that the enemy sees where they are and they can target them. If
Right.
you move them, and the hybrid program that we're working on makes them an autonomous vehicle as well. So then they have movement. So you're not in the same place all the time. But thinking about it even from an urban metropolitan area, non-military but government basis, there is a lot of activity that can be utilized from a surveillance standpoint, that people use helicopters or Cessnas and other planes and things a lot. We have the ability to hover, but we can do it at low altitude, and we can do it in a way that also allows deployment of more commercially oriented drones for sniffing, sensor technology, and that sort of thing. So there's a number of things that are certainly applicable. And I'll wait until maybe the next session to talk about the commercial aspects, because from a media standpoint, there's some very interesting technologies and patented technologies that we have, unless you'd like me to talk about them now and forget about the next session.
I mean, I think there's interest in this technology. We know the couple companies that are the main Emirati drone manufacturers and some of the defense that are utilizing some of this capability in a defense standpoint. We could introduce you to them. I don't think they're there yet on having made a decision, but it might be something that's coming, especially if you have a small capability. So it doesn't hurt to try to do more research and due diligence.
And that is the point. The affordability of these compared to the Lockheed type ships is exponentially different. And so the kind of money that it takes to acquire these, outfit them, compared to the very large heavy lift type programs are very, very different. And so it does allow for some experimentation.
I understand.
Thank you.
Thank you, both of you. I'm going to move on to Edge. We'd had some questions about Edge, and I know that Miles had wanted me to mention when Franz and I were there in February, we had a meeting with a wonderful person who was running Edge. And I know that they were talking about some of the things that they were looking for. And so he just wanted me to share some of the very basic notes just so that people could keep in mind if they may be appropriate for investments that Edge might make or partners. And so there were 5 sectors that Edge said they were focusing on. And just as a reminder to everyone, Edge is owned by the Abu Dhabi I guess government, tell me if I'm wrong on this, Danny and David. They do defense and security for the entire country. And they said they were focusing on 5 sectors. 1, missile ammunition. 2, platforms and systems like fighters, armed vehicles, sea vehicles, underwater vehicles. The 3rd area was cybersecurity. The 4th area was electronic warfare and intelligence. And the 5th main area was mission support, like maintenance, repair and overhaul, services for armed forces. And then they said they want 3 types of partners that they're looking for. 1 is a commercial partner that they would buy and sell from each other. 2 would be a commercial partner who would love to help them grow their portfolio by developing things. And the 3rd type of partner would be a strategic partner that would help things to happen in the, help things happen in the UAE, IP, knowledge transfer, push their defense sector to be more robust. And obviously because there's sort of this high-end, pretty amazing group there, and the type of technology that they do want is pretty high-end. There can be an ITAR problem, of course, but he said there are some areas where they're commercialized enough and it's not too much of a risk or sensitive that there could be, a partner with some Utah companies. So just keep that in mind for all of your companies. If you fit those categories, that is what Edge is looking for in partners. Does that seem like it's compatible with what you're hearing, David and Danny?
Yeah, it is. I just caution you from what I said yesterday. Edge is the recreation of the previous Emirati entity that was stood up to bring together all these disparate UAE companies that were owned by the government, and there were some 27 of them.
Wow.
Edge is the new iteration of this. They are working hard to try to fuse these companies together and make one conglomerate like a Lockheed Martin, but a UAE version of that. And in doing that, they're breaking down a whole lot of different cultures and trying to get a whole lot of different people to work together that previously competed. So it's gotten a bit of a slow start. The other Emirati, or some of the other Emirati private companies are working really closely with the UAE military customer. And Edge should not be your only focus. It should be one of your 3 or 4 entities, main entities that you spend time with when you visit and try to build relationships.
Can you tell us sorry.
No, go ahead, please.
Can you tell us the main difference between Mubadala Aerospace and Strata? I mean, I know Strata is supposed to be sort of the golden child, but how do they differentiate themselves?
Strata is a subsidiary of Mubadala Aerospace.
Okay.
Strata makes composite parts for Boeing and Airbus commercial airplanes, and was created as a subsidiary of one of Mubadala Aerospace. Think of Mubadala as a holding company, and Strata is just one of the many companies that are owned by the holding company, and it's being held under the Mubadala Aerospace vertical within Mubadala as one of its operating companies.
Okay. And obviously,
when Mubadala started, it had entities that were involved in defense, and Mubadala has shed over the last 8 to 10 years all of anything that has to do with, as my friend Homaid likes to say, anything that goes boom in the night has been sold by Mubadala to some of these other Emirati entities, because Mubadala doesn't want to be on the offensive side of any defense applications, and even increasingly, it's not even on the defensive side. It's on civilian aerospace, communication satellites, aerospace, anything commercial. Mubadala is involved in, but defense application, it's moved completely away from in the last few years.
Okay, Miles, go ahead. It looks like we're running out of time. I can see you moving forward.
Thanks, Courtney. Yeah, looking at the time, I do think it's time to wrap up. Really grateful to everybody for their participation. The questions were phenomenal. We want to make sure that we are using these conversations to drive specific action after the fact. Like Danny mentioned, as you're building relationships in the UAE, it's important to take several trips over there, right? And so right now we're not traveling as much. We want to make sure we're doing virtual introductions, but there can be costs involved with building these relationships. And so again, a pitch for World Trade Center Utah's grant programs. We have grant funding we've worked very hard to secure. We're looking to give grants to the very best Utah companies to help offset the costs of growing internationally. Given how important the UAE is a business destination and their business partners there for Utah companies, we want to make sure that we always have enough grant funding available to help Utah companies that apply and qualify receive this funding to get over there. We also can provide additional consultation, matchmaking, and our market research. And so please reach out. Use what we've discussed today to think through what the opportunities may be for your company in the UAE. Reach out to us, reach out to Danny and David, and we will make sure that we're synced up and coordinating to help provide support to help you grow in the UAE. So thank you, Danny and David, for your participation, and thank you to everybody for dialing in. You'll get an email from Hannah with the slides that David went over, as well as a link to this presentation. And so keep an eye out for that. And final plug, tomorrow morning, 7:30 a.m., we're doing a session with Saudi Arabia to go over their Giga projects. We have some very senior Saudi business leaders who will be joining us. It'll be 7:30 a.m. our time, 4:30 p.m. Riyadh time. That's something that if you can go to our website, take 5 minutes to read up on it. If you think there could be an interest for you, your company, or companies you're working with, I highly recommend you dial into that session. So with that, thank you again for being with us, and we look forward to following up with you.